Okay, we just went through a guided or a the solve it question. That's going to be our bell ringer. After we do that, we're always going to get into a focus lesson. The focus lesson is just my way of kind of showing you some of the things that you're going to be doing. At the end of the focus lesson, I will put up some questions that are called guided practice questions. During the focus lesson, your job is not to take notes. You might participate a little bit with your calculator if there's something going on to make sure you can type that in, but for the most part, the focus lesson is just your time to kind of listen. I'm going to work it out kind of like a student, and then after each problem, let's say I work through problem 1 as a student, I explain it as well as I can, but there's still some things you don't understand. Just make sure you pause the video, raise your hand or bring your computer over to me and ask about some of the stuff that you still don't understand, because what this is doing is just making sure that you understand the main information that you need to know. So getting into this, again, you don't need to take notes on the focus lesson part, although there is some work to do at the end. But I think there are three focus lesson questions for us to look at. So there's 3 main topics that you need to understand by the time you leave. Problem number 1 is just asking what are the coordinates of the vertex of each graph. And then they want to know if it's a minimum or a maximum. So the first thing we're going to learn is that this shape, whenever it's shaped like a U, is called a parabola. Alright, it's called a parabola. We're going to talk about that more as we go. But again, these are both parabolas. The one thing about parabolas is that they go up and come down, or they go down and then they come up. And the vertex is the point where it turns from going up and goes down, or turns from going down to going up. And it's pretty easy to identify typically because it would be like the top or bottom of the hill. And so in this case, your vertex is right here. And so if they wanted the vertex of this graph, you simply say it's x is 0, so 0 comma, and then you go up 1 2 3. So 0 comma 3 would be your vertex in this question, from what I know. And then they want to know if it's a minimum or a maximum. And again, if I'm talking about y, these are smaller, getting bigger, getting bigger, getting bigger, reaching 3, and then going back down. There is nothing higher than the number 3 in this whole thing. And because everything is below, I believe that this would be a maximum. Again, there is nothing higher than 3. This is going up, and it's the top of the hill, kind of like the king of the hill, and then it goes back down, which means that this would be the highest point of that hill, which means that this is a max. So the vertex on A is 0 3, because that's the point of it, and it's a maximum because it goes up and it comes back down, and that is a maximum. Looking at the second one, if I'm trying to identify the vertex, it's right here. And again, in terms of coordinates, the x is 1, the y is -1. Again, I went over 1, down 1 to find my vertex. Now I have to determine if it's a minimum or a maximum. But notice in this case, it's going down, 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 down. It reaches this point, and then it goes up, 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 up. And so in this case, this is a low point because everything's above it, which means that this would be a minimum, a minimum in this case. Again, because this is a low point, it's a minimum. Because this is a high point, it's a maximum. And again, the vertex is the point where it turns. That's problem or part number 1 that you have to have down by the time you leave today. Problem number 2 is asking me to graph the function y is equal to 1/3 x squared. Now I know I showed you how to do it on the graphing calculator. We will do that at some point, but the key thing about this is that we do want to make sure that we learn how to do it the right way. And the right way is that you make a table. You need 5 points to graph a parabola. And in the graphs that you have in this section, 9.1, 0 is always going to be your center point. And then after that, we'll kind of do some work to see what's going on. So 0 is my center point. So I want to plug in 1/3 times 0 squared. Again, remember you have to do the 1/3 as a fraction, or in the parentheses. 1/3 times 0 squared, of course, is 0. And so that means 0, 0 is your first point. Keep in mind that you can recall this information by simply hitting second enter. So second enter, and then let's try 1 and see what we get whenever we turn that 0 into a 1. And notice that we get a decimal. Well, we really don't want to have to plot decimals if it's not necessary, so let's go from 1 to 2 because I'd rather have whole numbers. So second enter, let's turn the 1 into a 2 because I want nice numbers. That doesn't work. Let's try 3. and notice that I get the answer of 3. So 3, of course, leads to 3. 4, 5. I think 4 and 5 probably will do the same thing if I did that. Yep. And 6 will more than likely give me a nice number there also, which gives me the answer of 12. And so because I know I'm going, if you notice the pattern, you're going 0 to 3 to 6, it means that I'm probably going to check negative 3. So let's do 1/3, in parentheses of course, times negative 3 squared, just to see what happens. And notice that we get the answer of 3 again. And you can assume that we're probably going to have negative 6, and if you notice the pattern, you're probably going to end up with a 12. So let's see, 1/3 times negative 6 squared is 12. And again, this is what's special about the parabola, which is why you need 5 points. 0, 0 is here. We're going to count by ones. 0, 0 is right there. 3, 3 means go over 3, 1, 2, 3, and up 1, 2, 3. 6, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It'll be somewhere way up there, so we don't need to put it on there, but we do know it's up. And then negative 3, 3, so 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And we know its shape is like a U, and because we know the shape, we understand that it's going to do something like this. And so you draw your best version of a graph that is a U. Notice that your vertex is 0, 0. It is the only point on this table that did not repeat. After that, your numbers repeat themselves over and over and over again. So 3 goes to 3, 12 goes to 12, and that's pretty much how it works. So whenever you go to graph them, just make sure you find the vertex. Again, start with 0 on all the ones right now in the center, and then use the points around it. You can try 1 and see if it goes that way, but for the most part, just make sure you are getting the 0 as your center point, and then going from there off of that. This one here says use your graphing calculator to graph each function. What is the order from widest to narrowest of the graphs? So I'm just going to draw a cheap sketch of each of these. And again, if you remember yesterday, we simply hit the y equals button to get there, and we clear out our graphs. Negative 4x squared. When I look at that graph, it is going down. It seems to be pretty narrow to me, but again, that graph is going to be something like this. 1/4 x squared, again, go back to your y equals, clear it out. Remember, 1/4 is a fraction, so we put it in parentheses. X squared, let's see what that looks like. It's definitely much wider than the other one, and it's opening up. Again, it's going through 0, 0. And then talking about your x squared, so y is equal to clear x squared. Graphing that is definitely not as wide as the first one, but it opens up. Here's the first thing that you have to get out of this. Notice that the negative 4 opens down. Positive 1/4 opens up. Positive x squared opens up. So one thing you can get from this is that the negative makes it open down and that the positive makes it open up. The second thing we can do is we can look at how these numbers affect the width of the graph. And so I'm going to put these things in here together because I'm really not sure about negative 4x squared and x squared. So I want to kind of look at those again to see which one's more narrow. So I'm going to do the negative 4x squared here. And remember, I can just put x squared next. And that because I'm doing this all in one, that this is going to graph first, this is going to graph second, and we can see which one is more narrow. There's my negative 4. And there's my x. It seems that my x is wider than my negative 4. So if you're putting these in order, the widest of them is B. The second widest is C. The last is A. And so that would be the order that they want. Again, the widest, they want widest to narrowest. The widest one is this one is next, and then that one is third. But let's look at this because, again, there has to be a way to do this without doing all that work. And let's actually just ignore this negative and just put it in as 4x squared. It's just x squared. Yeah, x squared, 4x squared. So let's clean these things out. Let's put 4x squared as 1. I'm sure we can identify that. 1/4 x squared as another one, as we kind of check this out, and then x squared as the third one. If you look at all three of these graphs, they are all parabolas. It's just that some get more and more narrow than the other ones. And so I'm going to go ahead and draw that picture and kind of label what I remember about it. Based off of what I see, your picture looks something like this. This is my 4x squared. This is my x squared. And this is my 1/4 x squared. So if I'm looking at my numbers here, that's a 4, this is a 1, this is a 1/4. It seems to me that the smaller number is out here and the bigger number is in there. It's almost as if you're climbing a mountain, and if you're climbing faster you're going to go up faster, and if you're climbing slower you're going to go up slower. So this is fast and this is slow, and this would be the slowest, and it just kind of goes that way as you slow down. But as you speed up, it just kind of shoots right up into the sky. So if we're looking at this in terms of what's going on, let's compare 2x squared with 4x squared. Looking at this, if 2 is smaller than 4, based off of the fact that this is a faster number than this one, this should be more narrow, I believe. This should be more wide. But let's look at it real fast just to make sure. So y equals, clear these things out. You have 2x squared, so let's put that first. 2x squared is going first. 4x squared is going second. This again should be more wide, that should be more narrow, so it should go in as we graph it. Let's see if that's true. 2x squared, and there's your 4x squared. Sorry you didn't get to see that. So 2x squared, 4x squared, in the light for you to see, looking carefully, or graphing for yourself. 2x squared is out there. Notice that 4x squared is on the inside of it. So it does make sense that that works that way. The bigger the number, the more narrow it is. So if you compared 1/2 x squared with 1/4 x squared, from what I know, if you took a shape and broke it into a half versus taking that same shape and breaking it into fourth, this is smaller. Based off of the fact, again, this is the same size shape except I took a fourth of it. This is smaller. Smaller should be more wide. Bigger should be more narrow. So let's see. Y equals 1/2 x squared, and y equals 1/4 x squared. So again, based off of what I got, 1/2 should be more narrow, 1/4 should be more wide. Let's see if it starts out narrow and widens out as we do this graph. There's your 1/2, and look at that, there's your 1/4 going around the outside. So the general rule we can have is that the bigger number is more wide, or sorry, more narrow. Sorry, I need another pen. The bigger number is more narrow, and the smaller number is more wide. And so with those three things that we just talked about, take a moment, do these guided instruction practice questions, I guess you can call them that. There are 3 of them. You can get together and work together. Do your work on a separate sheet of paper. Again, you can rewind the video for some review because these questions are in the video, but it is due today for your points and for everything you're going to get credit for during the day. So question number 1 is simply asking what's the vertex of the graph. It wants to know if it's a minimum or a maximum. Question 2 wants you to set up a table and graph y is equal to -3x squared. And question 3 wants the order from most narrow, or from widest to narrowest of the 3 graphs. So you're supposed to look at these 3 things and put them in order from widest to most narrow. Hand that in when you're done, and then there will be a second video of me talking through these as well as giving you some extra practice. So as I said, work together, use me, get to work. Again, this is your daily grade, and you want to make sure you're handing this in if you want credit for the day. Good luck.